Chapter 9. The Mark IV braked, making a 180-degree turn to follow Richard's sedan. "We've got Coroner and Hashimi behind us," Moore said. "They're coming fast." Richard stepped hard on the accelerator. "Does he know you don't have the disc?" he asked, his tires burning parallel stripes as they hit the highway. "Coroner is more concerned about gold and settling old scores, however they may add up in his warped mind. Strap in, this may get rough," Richards growled, his bald head catching the light blazing from the Mark IV. The heavier vehicle gave them a jolt as it rammed the rear of Richards' car. Moore turned back to see Coroner grinning above the wheel. He came up on the left, crashing into them. The lighter car slid into a skid on the shoulder. Richards wheeled back to the pavement as Coroner rammed him again. The detective's expression fell into that blank look of a chess player thinking 10 moves ahead. "He's got the weight advantage, but I can outrun him," he muttered. He hit the straightaway along the Pacific Coast Highway, the smell of salt and diesel wafting into the sedan. Coroner maneuvered for another shot, oncoming cars swerving to avoid him. Hashimi fired on the Chevy. The rear window of Richard's car shattered in chunks, spraying over their backs. Coroner fell back as oncoming traffic picked up. Gunfire from the Mark IV was followed by the flat pop of a bursting front tire. The smell of burning rubber filled the car as Richard jerked the sedan to the highway's ocean side. They spun into a rollover, with Moore feeling pinned in against the door. He saw the back of Richard's head gleam with sweat as Christina's body crushed into his. The car left the pavement, twisted metal crunching onto a field of rock heads protruding from beach sand. It rolled over twice before landing back on its tires. Christina exhaled her breath, crushed by the force of the impact. As the car rolled onto the rocks, she let out a groan. The restraint of the safety harness had tore her blouse and scraped fresh from her shoulder. Dark appeared unconscious, but otherwise intact from the flight off the pavement. The air, acrid with rubber and gasoline, choked her as she popped the seatbelt. Pushing open the rear door, she clambered out unsteadily, stumbling on the unsure footing of slippery, surf-stained rocks. Seagulls scattered, screaming as ocean waves hammered the sandy beach a few yards below. Blood streamed from Richard's head, leaning against the steering wheel, the driver's door dented shut. Christina smashed the window with a rock, dragging his wiry frame through the opening. The gun in his leather shoulder holster dug into the soft flesh of her armpit, making her grimace. She jerked until his legs pulled through, one shoe snagging the rough edge of the window frame. She unhooked the shoe before freeing him from the wreck. As she turned to look for the darkness, a stone shard exploded from a bullet ricochet inches to her left. "Get down, we're under fire," Richards wheezed. Christina dropped to her belly as the next round split the air at head level. Coarse rock dug into her side as she rolled toward his voice, her palms scraping against salt slime and sand grit. "There's a tunnel under the highway just a few yards down," he managed, pushing himself to crawl across the rocky terrain. "What about Dart?" "He'd want us to get the hell out of here." "I'm going back for him." "Listen, lady, we move now, we might make the tunnel in one piece." Several rounds zinged off the wrecked sedan, sending sparks into patches of fog as it raced in from the sea. "It's a good night to die," Christina cried as a round pierced the car's gas tank, sending a burst of orange flame blazing the dark sky. She ran until the heat scalded her bare skin, then froze at the sound of his voice. "You should know better than to look for me there in all that light." "Too dark to die," she laughed. A shot spun her like a dancer. She dropped to her knees but kept her head down, crawling to dark. More shots zinged as they made their way to Richard's silhouette waving from the tunnel entrance. You got to believe, Dark whispered, his lips brushing her cheek and earlobe. Coroner's toying with us. He's drawing blood to see if we've got the stomach for it. Page 170. Moore limped on a bleeding knee as he trudged with Christina through the sand. By the time they reached the tunnel entrance, the shooting had stopped. They stepped through sand to concrete, her body sliding against his. He cupped her neck, turning her mouth to his. Well, ain't that sweet, Richards croaked. He headed into the tunnel. The traffic on the highway, meeting the crashing surf, swept away the moment. A distant siren wailed as Christina followed Richards, with Moore limping along behind, his pant leg plastered with blood. The figures moved to the dim light at the far end of the tunnel, traffic still thundering along overhead. Emerging, they moved into the shadows of a row of eucalyptus trees. Richards bent at the waist as Christina braced him. Moore hobbled over. Can you walk up the hill? She asked. Richards nodded in agreement. The stand of trees obstructed the view from the highway. This is a mixed blessing. We don't want to get lost from each other in the process of losing Coroner, he said, clutching at his chest. Moore pulled the detective's cell phone from his pocket and punched in numbers. Where are you? Christina asked from a background of static. Pacific Coast Highway, a mile or so south of Half Moon Bay. Coroner's gone completely off his nut. We managed to evade the assholes through a tunnel that comes out on a road heading for Woodside. You know the area? Tunitas, she replied. I had a repo there. I can be there in a few minutes. What about Coroner? I heard sirens, so he may have split. We're heading for cover, in no condition to run if he does come after us. Look for me, and I'll look for you. He helped Christina and Richard scramble up the hillside. The bank of fog broke through the tree line. Richard shivered in shock. He rubbed his arms while he negotiated layers of slippery leaves and mossy rocks. Despite the terrain and their wounded condition, Moore thought the light he detected filling the sky offered hope of a new day. They reached the shelter of a precipice. Richards lay propped against an upthrust boulder as Christina helped Moore wrap his wounded knee with his bandana. Early commuter traffic droned on the Pacific Coast Highway just below. Focusing on the weave of Christina's gabardine slacks torn at the knee, skin rubbed to raspberry blood on the fringes of her torn blouse, he glanced at Richards. His shoulder knob suspended his off-the-rack, loose-fitting suit, bald head glistening with sweat. The flesh below his eyes looked mottled and slack, his mouth tightly drawn in a near-death rictus. Your friend needs immediate medical care, Christina said as a siren wailed through the pounding of the surf on sand and tires on pavement. There must be police on the scene now. Use the cell phone and tell them where we are. No, Richards rasped. Stay away from the official channels and get to a refuge, the detective forced himself to sit. Keep me talking. If I fade out, I'm not coming back. Why are you helping us? Moore asked as he slipped an arm around the shoulders of the injured man. I'm not. I work for them, or at least I did. Richard spit the words out with a fit of coughing. Trust no one. His last words came with a grimace. Quesanda waited with the stolen BMW on the shoulder of the two-lane highway branching northeast along the creek. As Moore and Shaughnessy emerged from the tree line, carrying Richards between them, she jumped from the car to help. A tired gurgle from his slumped body signaled another casualty. Moore reached for the carotid artery. His pulse is gone. A tenor sax wailed from the car speakers as time seemed to stand still. Moore brought blood on his hand to his nostrils. He looked to Christina, shifting his weight to his good knee as she gripped him around his ribcage. Quisanda's braids danced in the wind. Then the awful still moment evaporated as sun rays shot up into the sky from a patch of pink to the east as last rites for the detective. "We leave him here," Quisanda said as she walked toward the car. "His family will see he gets a proper burial." She motioned Dark and Christine to the back seat, slid behind the wheel, and turned onto the 2-lane. He gathered Christina in his arms, straightening his bleeding leg best he could. "Somehow it seems he is still with us," Christina said as he slid his arm around her shoulders and glanced back at the detective's crumpled body. "What's scary about seeing corpses pile up is this indifference I feel," he replied. "It makes me feel jaded somehow. Are we just ghosts drifting in and out of temporary abodes? Funny how all along I had this nagging gut feeling that Casper Richards was not who he said he was. Just the way he reacted when Christina suggested calling the law." He wondered as his eyes caught Quisanda's. "I can see where you might be feeling a little turned around. I suspect he too works for Warren or McCracken," she offered. "Either way, I saw the bird," he rasped, straightening his good leg, pressing against the soft leather seat. "That sweet bird of paradise. I saw it fly when his soul passed." Quisanda punched the speed dial on her cell phone. "Officer down to Neatus Creek Road on the rocks above PCH. No names, I'm only a concerned citizen." She squeezed the phone. Page 172. She squeezed the phone shut, putting pedal to the sleek BMW. "I have a feeling our man was a real cop at one time. I'm letting a contact on the force know. He'll handle it discreetly. Casper Richards may have been moving to the shady side of the law, but he may still have family who deserve some respect. There's a redwood preserve up ahead. It's part of a wilderness space along the mountain ridge up there. There's a cabin you can reach from a back trail. I'll drop you guys there while I go check the status of our hunters." "How far is the cabin from the trailhead?" he asked as his fingers gently examined Christina's shoulder. "The shot just skipped along the muscle, missing the bone. Whoever fired it, I'm afraid it was Brother Corner, wanted us to know he could shoot close enough to kill. The wound will leave you with a scar," he consoled, "but you don't need stitches. It's more like a burn than a gunshot wound." "It burns all right, but I'm more concerned with the bleeding on your leg," she replied. "Give me your panties, and maybe I can stop the bleeding." Moore knew he could cut the dead silence with a knife. Tires kept chewing asphalt as Quisanda shot a quick look back. Then they all burst out laughing. "I really don't know where that came from." "Blame Corner's influence," he replied, feeling giddy from the excitement. He caught himself from babbling on in shock and nervousness. He recognized that disembodied enchantment being around passing souls. Mostly he recognized it from his own passing or near-death experiences where he had passed completely out of his body, images of a life shuffling by in his mind's eye like cards in a dealer's hand. As wheels turned, he became more aware how everybody lives within that whispered, extended moment between living and dying. Is life but a long, near-death experience, he wondered. He watched the road following the contour of the creek that snaked through rolling pastures fenced with woven wire riding for miles along crooked steel stakes. The BMW passed a blur of a ranch complex with barn, hacienda, and verandas, surrounded by horse corrals. Christina wrapped a hand over the hole in her peacoat where the slug had cut its path. My briefcase blew up with the car. In it were some papers related to and explanations for the stolen papyri. Those missing papyri may be the last link in a chain of evidence going back 3,000 years. Evidence that could realign global power. Of course, it's all contingent on whether or not these truths will be believed, be recognized. From my experiences in academia, it may not yet be time for this awakening. Rarer still are those who have awoken to realize being that, a being still in the first place, now knowing it as macrocosmic being. Most are still alienated by their roles of complete darkness generated by a being, y'all, now knowing, ignoring that overstanding of any mere understanding of a being. Hallelujah to that, sister! I pray to the Goddess Almighty that it is time. I'll give it all I got to find it, to bring it home, Quisanda offered, slapping her hand on the dashboard. You think McCracken is ready to negotiate? Sounds like an empty vessel to me, Moore replied. The road humped as Quisanda shifted gears, the needle of the tachometer a nervous thread jumping up and down RPMs. McCracken has no need for more deaths, and Corner brings him too much heat. He must want the chase to end, not to put a damper on the party, but I should tell you, Corner has been following us since the cutoff junction. I want to lose him before I leave you. I'd like to lose that son of a bitch down a black hole, Moore retorted. Yeah, you got a real psycho brother there, but then we all hope to see another day. She accelerated until the Beamer was coming out of sharp curves at 70. She hit a straightaway at 110, and the world flashed as light scattered and tires flared, their bodies thrown together. He found his lips kissing the back of Christina's neck. Here we go, Quisanda interrupted. This road is a mean snake, but we can outrun Corner. By the time they came to a screeching halt at the trailhead, they had ascended to a world where skies seemed suspended above the ground by masts of ancient redwoods standing hundreds of feet into the low-lying clouds. Feeder Creek, swollen by recent rain, crashed as brown gravy, rolling on home to the sea a few miles distant. A patchwork of pavement from different eras melted off narrow shoulders that plunged down the bank through sheared mossy boulders. There were no painted median stripes, only hand-sized steel mile markers marching along the road, disrupting the forest maze. One of the timbers rested at a 45 degree in the crotch of an adjoining tree. Despite their speed, the weather seemed to move with them, drinking the rising sun rays in a drifting gray mass. Tires blew foamy water from rain-chilled chuckles as Cassandra wheeled the Beamer into the cover of the trees. He's coming up fast, she said. For a psycho, the man can drive. Hardly were the words out of her mouth when Corner's Lincoln tore by. You guys better make tracks. He won't get far before he realizes we got behind him. Where's the cabin? Christina asked. First, I have to tell you there's a wild Injun named Enoch Tunnel living there. He's the last holdout of a native autonomy and the only man who ever shot at me when I repoed his vehicle. This trail is a back way I use to sneak into his property. Locals call this Confusion Hill. Sometimes it's hard to tell up from down. Walking up the hill can seem like down. Stay on the path until you come to a steel gate. Tell Enoch his friend from Wily'Em sent you. Should we give a holler when we get close so he knows we're coming? Don't worry. His pit bulls will let him know you're there, she replied as she drove away. I am all that is, that was, and is yet to come, Moore offered to the dense forest, dwarfing them in its magnitude. He put his arm across Christina's shoulder, and they started trudging down the uphill. Well, this is a far cry from your sandstone towers, he offered. Somehow our significance goes to zero out in this great world. So tell me, why? Why are we still here? I mean, we're really dwarfed to zilch just in these trees. He finished with an outstretched wave of his free arm. Page 174. Careful, or we may yet disappear, she replied, smiling up at him. The air was chill, giving her cheeks a vermilion glow. They paused, breath charged. Moore adjusted his arm on her shoulder. His lips turned in to meet hers. For that eternal moment captured in a kiss, he felt the world fall away. Then it poured back in a chill shower, and they trudged on. You know, it is funny in an appropriate sort of way. I mean, us humans having basically two brains, two distinct hemispheres inside our head. It can make us crazy, always looking for the other that is not missing, she offered. They paused to kiss as mist gathered into a soft rain. Hey, being that I am really getting off on you right now, if you were not bleeding to death as we speak, I would throw you down and make mad love to you right here and now, but better take a moment and gather our energies. Here, sit down. Let us see if we can do something about that bleeding. Christina put her arms around his neck as they leaned against the bark of a giant redwood towering into clouds above, with its girth enveloping their bodies. Guess it's crazy to get personal with all this going on, but I'm getting off on you too. Big time, baby. But I don't think I could come down enough to get it up. His voice seemed hollow against the massive redwood trunk. Looking up, hundreds of feet to its canopy, he thought for a second they had disappeared back into a mere awareness of a being there. I am going to try and put a tourniquet on that knee, she said, tearing strips from her blouse. She took strands of bark and wrapped the wound, tying it with the cloth. She adjusted the pressure by twisting in a stout finger of a branch. That is a bit too tight, but then let us see if it will stop the bleeding before we loosen it. So, tell me who we are right now. I can't go any further till I know. Are we love or lovers? Moore reached out and pulled her in close enough to look deep into her eyes. Tell me who I'm looking at. Looking or seeing? Seeing not what you think, what you desire. I know what you are feeling. I feel it too. Still, you can never see the indivisible eye of the one who sees. The seer in any eyes. Never really have what you desire as anyone other than the one desiring. You are me or I'm you. Ironically, your desire only seems as thoughts to move us apart, to divide as word as XYZ zapping, a thinking of it. Moore thought he'd heard painting as sword, cutting an echo of any information of it as personic E-waves. Now he found any sense of it folding blackjack, of it unseen, unheard, in a word, freedom, untouched awareness of anybody, anything, king, anytime, anywhere. They moved at arm's length, their eyes still locked. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, but we cannot see in word. the one who sees. Only as a denial of a being seen still indivisible in the first place. A me of me. Any awareness of the ABCs of who we really are stays, in a word, freedom. Ha! It's a real hoot. All this fire and blood and lust. In a word, in the beginning, middle, end is the word. It's really blowing my mind with brain cum. She laughed. Yet still remaining ever free untouched, she offered breathlessly as she leaned back in to kiss his lips. But reality includes hypothermia. Best keep moving. Only ferns and lizards can live in the redwoods, a man once said. Linked together arm in arm, they ambled beneath a canopy so dense that only the fiddleback ferns competed for the path. He pulled from Christina. Prove me wrong, but I think Wasana doesn't want to give anything to Corner. We may be on our own. The whole chase seems like a setup somehow, but people keep dying. Shafts of light fell through as the forest gave way to open country of Chaparral and Manzanita. The trail seemed to play out as a dog's bark and a wisp of smoke stopped them in their tracks. This place is definitely enchanting. We hope enough for Enoch Tuttle. A doe danced down the cut bank and onto the road, sending Quasana skidding sideways down a steep grade. She pulled out of it just before hitting a series of switchbacks. She flashed on Dark and Christina and the undisturbed back trail leading to Enoch Tuttle. She remembered years ago having been issued a repossession order on his Camaro, sending her driving to Tuttle's at midnight, pit bulls and buckshot waiting. She admired Enoch's ride as one of the funkiest res cars she'd had the pleasure of hot wiring. She knew of his reputation as a native mix of gristle and hot blood, and therefore not surprised he took a shot at her while she worked the ignition. Enoch chased her with amazing speed for a man an inch under 5 feet tall, with a belly like a sumo wrestler. His Levi's were hacked off for length to accommodate stubby legs, barrel chest, bare the elements. He was an apparition to scare the shit out of her. She was dialing 911 into her cell when Enoch broke out with a laugh, a meaty paw snatching her phone. You, a sister, and working for the man, he had growled. Over cups of black coffee, she'd offered to try working out a deal with the company. The Camaro in its res condition of rusted rocker panels and torn upholstery had seemed hardly worth life or limb. Then, coming over a rise, she saw in the rearview mirror the tree-lined ridge, free of Coroner's Lincoln. As the road leveled out into civilization, she felt confident she'd make it. She speed-dialed McCracken. Want to try again? Quasana, my dear, so good of you to be in touch. She negotiated traffic, her muscles tightening when the voice came back. Page 176. Tired of the chase. About time to come home to Papa. I'm taking the chance to read the disc. Get behind me on this. I need your support, Papa. Heard about the fire? Corner is all over that. But it's not the pile of bricks that concerns me. A body was found. I haven't made an ID yet, but I'm afraid it's my sensei. I'm sure he died in his boots anyway. I don't want to come in with him coming up behind. Then he's your problem. Let me talk to some people.